Hi everybody, Brian Goulet here again from Goulet Pens, and I have a special treat for you. Today I'm going to be inking up the TWSBI 580 ALR Caribbean with Onyx. Now I love this color. I'm a big fan of blues, teals, turquoises, anything in the blue family really. That is maybe not a shock if you've ever seen me or met me, but I really like this. I think the black accents on the trim pair very nicely with the teal color. And I wanted to ink it up with an ink choice that sort of matched the color a little bit. And I was trying to think what would match well. There wasn't anything particularly in the TWSBI brand that I thought nailed it, but I had this new ink that came out earlier this year from Jacques Herbin, Turquoise de Perse. Now this is a turquoise color with some gold shimmer in it. And while I have used it a little bit, this is my personal bottle that I have yet to open, so you will get to see the full experience. So here is the Turquoise de Perse, and a fun little thing. If you are trying to open it, it's sealed at the top, but if you open it from the bottom, you don't have to crack that seal. So I do this often, and this is interesting because I opened it from the bottom, but I'm seeing the cap. So I don't think this is normal, but this ink was packaged upside down. So that's kind of fun. It comes with this little booklet. It's got some information in it about Jacques Herbin, about the ink. Very cute little staple-bound booklet. So that's kind of fun. You don't always get that with inks, but this is kind of a special ink. This is in their anniversary series. You can see in the bottom there's a lot of shimmer, and it likes to settle in there. I love the wax seal, the little rope, I guess that is, whatever that's called. It just looks really nice. It looks celebratory. It looks special. This ink looks special. So I go to uncap it, and that is interesting. I think because it was packaged upside down, all of the shimmer that settled, what would normally be in the bottom, it all settled in the cap. I have to say, this is kind of a first for me. I don't know exactly how long I've had this ink sitting on my bookshelf, but it's been a while. So you can see there that the shimmer is dissipating. Now, I'm shaking it, but I'm not shaking it aggressively. Because if you shake it aggressively, it'll introduce a lot of air bubbles. And then you go to fill your pen and you get air into it, and it's just not as easy. It's a little messier. So just a gentle rocking back and forth will do it. It might take a little longer. I still have some heavier sheen. Oh, and there I decided to dump the ink all over my fingers. I thought that would be, just something really fun to do on camera for you all. I will often do this when I feel like maybe my desk isn't clean enough and I would like to have to wipe everything down. Maybe I don't have enough going on during the day and I would really like to clean my desk and scrub my hands thoroughly. It's really a choice that I make in the moment. You can choose to do this yourself or not. It's really up to you. Fountain pens are there for however you want to use them. Now I just decided to go with it here, taking the ink and just sort of playing with it a little bit. I would not necessarily tout myself as any kind of an artist, but I can easily smear ink across a page when I've dumped it all over it. So I'm just kind of spreading it out a bit to see what happens, mostly because this is a pretty heavy shading ink. It's got a lot of shimmer to it, and I'm just curious to see what happens when you dump an entire pen's worth of ink. I got some on the table there. I really wanted to be thorough and make sure that I got ink all over everything possible while the camera was running. So we're just gonna maybe leave this here. I can already see the shimmer really coming out. Now this is going to look very dark. The shimmer is going to be very heavy, and we're just going to let it sit there as I shoot the rest of the video. That way we can see what happens, because, you know, it's just a happy little accident, as Bob Ross would say. And yep, there we go. I got plenty of ink all over the bottle too. You know, really wanted to make sure I got it everywhere. So because there's so much shimmer in this ink, I can see it glistening on my fingers. It's really quite beautiful. Nice little accent there. It's already settling in the bottom, as you can see there. It's an ink that's going to require you to remain very, very active, very involved if you want to get the most out of that shimmer. Of course, you don't have to. You can do whatever you want with your ink. I'm just going to rock it gently back and forth a few thousand times, get it nice and evenly dispersed, that shimmer throughout the ink. And then I'm going to pretty quickly want to fill my pen. Now this is the piston filling pen, so when it's in the up position, I've got to move it all the way down. I like to do this when it's outside the bottle, because if you put the nib into the bottle and then push the piston down, you're going to force a bunch of air into the ink, and it will create bubbles. Not that that's not workable, but I just don't like to do that. So there we go. I want to make sure my hands block the camera so you can't see what I'm doing here. And I'm filling the pen with some ink. Now, this pen will hold about 2 milliliters of ink, which is a very good volume, especially if you want to dump it on as heavily as I have here. This would be a good pen to do that with. There we go. And this is the 580 ALR, which is a little bit special. Of course, it's a variant of the 580, which was the original TWSBI Diamond 580, and then they came out with an aluminum version, the AL, which has some aluminum pieces to it. All the Caribbean color pieces you see, that's all the aluminum ones. And the ALR has some extra little accents, one of which is the texture that's on the grip. It's kind of these engraved rings that go around the grip, which some people love and some people absolutely hate. I'm fairly neutral on it. If they weren't there, I would be fine, but they do not bother me. So I'll set that ink over there. It's still not dry. Spoiler alert, it won't be dry by the time we finish this video. Now this pen can be posted technically. TWSBI does not say that it's postable because it posts on the filler knob. It's a little long, so I tend not to post it anyway. Now this is a stainless steel nib, approximately number 5 size, if you're familiar with Bach and Jovo nibs. So it's a pretty good size nib. And it is stainless steel, so no flexibility, no wild properties to the nib. It's just a good sturdy nib, relatively smooth. I can never remember how to spell Caribbean. You would think maybe I'd know. I've written it out I don't know how many times, but I don't have autocorrect on my writing pad here, so we're just gonna, I think the first way I wrote it is correct, but I don't know. We're just gonna go with that. So I'm just kind of writing it out, doing some X marks to see if there's any line variation, which there's not really on the crosstroke or the downstroke. I'm getting a pretty generous flow. I will say that this is Rhodia paper. It's Rhodia blank paper. I don't use Rhodia blank paper very often, and honestly, this pad has been around for a long time. So I've had this for a while. It's literally, this wasn't the pad that I was planning on writing on, but I sort of had to improvise because of my ink adventure there. I tried flipping the nib over, and to be quite honest, it was a miserable experience. Now, this is something that a lot of people like to know, some people like to do in their videos, is flip the nib. Sometimes, if the nib is smooth enough, when you flip it over, you get a finer line. You definitely get a fine line with this one, but it feels scratchy and it is terrible. So can't say that I would recommend it, but it might just be this particular nib. I would say probably TWSBI's maybe not tuning it to be written reverse writing, but if that is something you desire, you might get lucky, or you can probably tune and smooth it yourself or have a professional do it if that is a feature that you desire on this particular pen. Now you can see the ink as it's been sitting here, the shimmer is falling out of suspension already. It's just been a couple of minutes. So this tells me two things. One is that, you know, the shimmer in the ink is pretty well saturated. It's enough where you can visually see it in there. But also, it's going to fall out of suspension fairly quickly, which means anytime you swab it, anytime you ink a pen or whatever, you're going to have to shake it up a pretty good amount. So I'm doing a swab, not that I necessarily need to because I just put a fair amount of ink down on the other paper. But at this point I'm noticing that for whatever reason, this Rhodia blank paper is a little more absorbent than this Rhodia dot paper. I don't know why that is. It might just be because they were made at two very different times, because I think this blank paper is many years old. 7, 8 years old if I had to guess. I had it just laying around. But you can see now you're seeing a difference here because I put a lot of ink down on that A5 sheet. But hey, we're just gonna go with it. You can see the difference between putting a lot of ink down on maybe a slightly more ink resistant paper and putting it down a lighter amount on a more absorbent paper. You're gonna see a little bit of the variation in color there. So I'm going to write out, just for my own curiosity's sake, write it out on this dot pad paper. It does seem to be a little more ink resistant. I decided to go with 1R and 2Bs on Caribbean, which I've since looked it up and that is the correct spelling. So congratulations to me for remembering a basic spelling. Now it feels just about as smooth as I'm writing with it because the paper is not making that much of a difference, but it is a somewhat noticeable difference in terms of the absorbency, and I'm moving the pen around there because I'm noticing even as I'm writing, some of the shimmer will actually settle a little bit in the pen. So if you want to be making sure that your shimmer is staying, you know, as dispersed throughout the ink as possible, moving the pen about a little bit is going to be helpful to keep that shimmer in suspension. There you go. You can see again how much of that shimmer has kind of fallen out, even just sitting there for a couple of minutes. So this is not a no maintenance ink. It's one that will require your active attention, I'll say. So I gave it a little shake there. And just because I'm curious mostly about the difference in the paper, which shouldn't really be there, but I don't know. Swabbing it similarly as I did on the blank paper on this dot one. And I'm noticing a slight difference, not a world of difference. It is from the same brand after all. The properties I believe are similar, but you can really see now as the original blob is drying, that shimmer is really starting to come through, very prominent. At this point I decided I hadn't made enough of a mess, so I tried writing within the very wettest spot, which, fun fact, when you do that you end up scraping through the paper and allowing it to bleed through. So that wasn't really the paper's fault. That was just me trying to do something creative that was a miserable fail. But that's okay. We've learned something. It's not fully dry, but you can get a pretty good sense, maybe, of some of the color. Really not sure which camera is going to show it the best. But you can see that shimmer is really shining through as it dries. Now again, this Rhodia paper is a little bit more on the ink resistant side, maybe some other papers that you might use. So it'll show pretty good all-around performance of this ink. You'll use some papers that will be maybe a little less dark, a little less crisp, a little less shimmer, and you might use some that are more but I think Rodeo is a really good baseline for a lot of fountain pen folks. And then, of course, this one you see very intense sheen, very intense shading and color. And of course, it looks beautiful on my hands. I'll proudly walk around the office the rest of the day like this. And interesting enough, it kind of matches my wedding ring, which is not intentional, but I like it. And then you can see here, it's granted this is maybe a heavier degree of shimmer because I was wiping the cap of the bottle, but you can see it on the paper towel there. I hope you've enjoyed this video using the 580 ALR and the Turquoise de Perse. Beautiful pairing. I've really enjoyed spending time with you today. I hope that you've enjoyed this style of video. Hope that you felt inspired, maybe to ink up some combinations of your own. Thank you for watching, and write on.